In July 1969, an American machine lifted off and set a course for the moon, an absolute peak of human engineering. The chief architect behind that vast space program was a celebrated and heavily decorated engineer named Wernher von Braun. After the Second World War, President Harry Truman issued an explicit directive regarding German immigration. No active members of the Nazi Party and no war criminals were permitted to enter the United States. Wernher von Braun held a specific, damning history. He was a major in the SS. How did a nation engineer its highest technological victory using a high-ranking officer of the fascist regime it had just spent years trying to destroy? The Joint Intelligence Objectives Agency operated with a shadow mandate: secure German scientific minds before the competition could. They bypassed the president's orders by altering history. Intelligence officers used physical paperclips to fasten freshly typed, completely fabricated biographies over the men's heavily redacted Nazi records. With their pasts erased, the military quietly shipped these scientists onto American soil, moving them into secret lives at Fort Bliss in Texas and Redstone Arsenal in Alabama. By the time the first scientists arrived at Fort Bliss, American rocketry was already intertwined with a secret, permanent archive of erased histories. The U.S. government justified this through geopolitical panic. In October 1946, Soviet forces executed Operation Oso Aviakim, a single night where they kidnapped thousands of German scientists and their families, transporting them east. The Cold War arms race turned into a battle for the minds behind the weapons, placing strategic advantage far above moral accountability. For von Braun and his operations director, Arthur Rudolph, that advantage was forged in a place called Mittelwerk. Mittelwerk was an underground factory carved into a mountain by concentration camp prisoners. Here, the SS forced starving inmates to assemble V-2 rockets. The conditions were so brutal that an estimated 20,000 prisoners died on the assembly lines. Von Braun personally visited this underground facility. Military records confirm he actively requested prisoners from the camps to use as his workforce. This chart compares the casualties of the V-2 program. The death toll of the prisoners inside Mittelwerk vastly outnumbers the people killed by rockets in combat. The U.S. government willingly ignored the blood on their hands. They simply needed a new sponsor. This protection extended far beyond rocketry into the field of space medicine. Hubertus Struckhold was brought to America and eventually celebrated as the father of the discipline. The aerospace community honored him with a prestigious award bearing his name, ignoring his history of overseeing lethal medical experiments on human beings. At the Dachau concentration camp, Struckhold's department subjected prisoners to extreme freezing, high-altitude oxygen deprivation, and deliberate infections. The military designated men like Struckhold and von Braun as vital assets, ensuring their wartime records remained buried while they led the program's critical projects. In these laboratories, the military rebranded torture as science, turning engineers of the Holocaust into the architects of the American future. The strategy delivered results. Von Braun's team successfully built the Redstone, the Jupiter, and the Saturn V rocket, securing American space dominance for a generation. For 50 years, the American taxpayer unknowingly funded the careers, the laboratories, and the pensions of these war criminals. When the Department of Justice finally investigated Arthur Rudolph decades later, he quietly renounced his citizenship and fled the United States in 1984 to avoid prosecution. The aerospace community proved equally stubborn. The medical award bearing Hubertus Struckhold's name was only retired in 2013, after decades of relentless protests from survivors and historians. Operation Paperclip remained classified until 1995. The government kept the files hidden because they understood the public would reject this moral compromise. Someone in power looked at the victims of Mittelwerk and Dachau and decided that ambition was more important than justice. Wernher von Braun died in 1977. He was celebrated, decorated, and mourned. Most of his victims possessed no graves, and they received no ceremonies. Operation Paperclip relied on a silence so sustained that it became indistinguishable from complicity. The highest technological leap in human history was propelled by unpunished atrocity, casting a permanent, dark shadow over the lunar surface.